work in, a lot of us work in isolation, and we work with our small budgets, and don't really collaborate enough to amplify the work that we're doing or the information that we can get, and the information that we can spread as well. So good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Road to Equal Justice. I appreciate Peace Tech Lab for bringing this innovative program to Miami to provide free media, data, and technology training to organizations working on social justice in our city. I've seen many familiar names on the participant list today, and all I could think is, okay, here are the usual suspects who make so much happen in our community to bring justice to individuals. So I appreciate those folks being on here today. For those individuals who do not know who I am, I'm Carlos Martinez. I'm the Miami-Dade public defender. It's a lot easier to Google me and just find out whatever information. The only thing that I will tell you, if you're going to Google me for background, you need to make sure that you put the words public defender in quotes. Otherwise, you're going to get the baseball player, you're going to get the doctor, there's a neurologist, there's a surgeon. There are a lot of Carlos Martinez. It's a very common name. But having served as public defender for the last 12 years, I am working with a lot of the folks who are on this Zoom right now towards the same goals as the rest of you are here today, to make sure that we have a more just, more equitable, smarter, and safer criminal justice system that serves all of the people of Miami-Dade County, specifically those who are trapped in a cycle of poverty as a result of their involvement with the criminal court system. So a little bit of my background. I went on to become the first person in my family to attend law school. Hopefully the new generation, there'll be some lawyers coming out of that group. I worked my way up in the public defender's office, having served 19 years under my predecessor, Bennett Brummer, who was also a champion for justice, and he was public defender for 32 years. Every day in my office, as most of you know, we see the failures of government. We see the failures of government and the impact they have on individuals, specifically on the poor and on people of color. We see the failures of school. We see the lack of an adequate social safety net. We see the lack of adequate health care. We see the lack of trauma-informed services or trauma-informed training so that people can deal with their trauma and live a more rich, fulfilling life. And we also see how that impact ripples out into the communities. And it ripples out, and in many instances, it really has become an engine for generations of people trapped in poverty. And so I'm super excited to be here this morning. The way I see the role of technology is really how it dovetails into what we want to see more of in the justice system. We want to have more transparency. We want to have more accountability of the players, whether it be police, whether it be the prosecutors, whether it be judges, whether it be defense counsel as well, private or public. We also want folks to have better accessibility, to clear their records, to reinstate licenses, to remove barriers to employment. So those three things are kind of, to me, the overarching view and the overarching areas that we need to focus on. For transparency, we know there are data dashboards. There are data dashboards that Measures for Justice has developed. There are other organizations, there are lots of other organizations that have data dashboards, whether it's about community well-being, whether it's about policing practices or prosecutorial practices. Those dashboards and that data actually provides transparency, much needed transparency. But the data is not enough. We need to have accountability. There needs to be a process where the data is getting reviewed and where the data actually results in changing practices and it changes what's accessible to folks. So we have a lot of work to do. We know there's a lot of us, a lot of work to do, and we can accomplish a lot of this together. I really believe in the power of law to make a difference. I started in the public defender's office by taking a $7,000 pay cut 30 years ago. I took a pay cut to start in the public defender's office because I had worked for Exxon Company USA before I went to law school. And I took a pay cut. But I took a pay cut because I knew the power of the law as an intern in the public defender's office. And as public defender, I know that we are making a difference in my office, what we're doing in Miami-Dade County, but it's one case at a time. We cannot do it alone, and we cannot do it just with yesterday's skill set that focused on trial advocacy, negotiation, and those skills. We need to get better, and we need to be able to leverage the power of technology, media, and data. I have seen its ability to scale our work, to analyze data, to better understand our issues, and more importantly, to accelerate the change that we need. I have seen the impact of body-worn cameras and the positive impact of body-worn cameras in reducing the likelihood that someone is going to be wrongfully convicted. Now we need to focus on other things. I think we need to harness the power of AI much more than we do. We've seen the power of AI used for nefarious purposes from my perspective, but there are other ways that we can use AI for analyzing patterns of arrest, patterns of abuse, physical abuse, patterns of excessive use of force, of illegal searches and wrongful arrest. I know that there's a lot more to do. We've had situations in Dade County with Miami Gardens Police Department and Biscayne Park Police Department, where there were thousands of bad police stops and bad police behavior on individuals, thousands of individuals impacted. If we can harness data sets, information, AI, I think we can, number one, help prevent those situations from reoccurring, but actually change the behavior, the bad behavior that some police officers we know exhibit. So I hope that we all join, and I'm really psyched to be here. And I'll just leave you with this. I know we saw George Floyd's death last year. We saw the power of the video. We saw the power of all the video, the audio, the data, the way that it was presented in the trial, where it was extremely clear to the jury exactly what happened and what the result should be. So let's focus on what we can do together on the technology. Thank you again to Peace Tech Lab for providing this training in Miami, and to all the organizations who are making Miami-Dade a better place. And thank you so much for all the work that you do.
That's great. Well, thank you, Carlos. You're really doing inspiring work. And I think we're going to hit on a lot of the things that you talked about today with the aspects of technology You mentioned more accountability, more transparency, accelerating change. And I think that we've got a lot of that coming up with, especially with Code for South Florida and Community Justice Project coming up next. So thank you, sir. Appreciate your time and really appreciate you joining us today.
Thank you very much.
All right, so next up is a session with Livio Zanardo from Code for South Florida and Alana Greer from Community Justice Project. I was looking through the bio of Livio, and he turned down a career in law to become a professional technologist. And I've been working with a lot of lawyers lately, and that seems like a good idea from that standpoint. He was looking at this from, he had a strong belief in how technology empowers individuals and organizations to scale. And Livio joined Code for Miami in 2019 as brigade captain, where he learned about the nuances of the public interest technology and civic hacking. And aside from leading some of the organization's flagship projects, he also leads the content strategy and creative direction of the organization's mission, vision, and purpose. Alana Greer is the director and co-founder of Community Justice Project, and she's really working on a lot of the important issues of the day, most of the issues that you're working on here as well. As a movement lawyer, she supports community-led campaigns for racial justice and human rights. She's passionate about lifting up the voices of the community members she works with, using her legal and analytic skills to support grassroots movements. She's seeking to dismantle structural racism and inequality. So welcome to you both. It's a pleasure to have you both here today. Livio, would you like to start with Community Justice Project? Or sorry, with Code for South Florida. Sorry, I'm getting those confused. Apologize.
No, it's okay. Thank you very much, Tim. Thank you. Thank you for putting together this fantastic panel. My name is Livio Zanardo. Like he said, I'm a Venezuelan-born, Miami-grown freelancer, technologist, and creative. And I made it my mission to kind of talk about, to champion this cause of civic technology in Miami, because other than the fact that I'm very much a diehard Miami resident, I see a lot of potential in how technology has not only changed my life but also changed the lives of other people. So thank you. Well, without further ado, let's get into the presentation that I prepared here for y'all. So, oops, give me 1 second. While I share my screen. Share screen, there we go. Here we go. And click, perfect. So present from the beginning. Okay, Tim, can you let me know if my screen is visible?
Yep, looks good.
All right, perfect. So today we're going to talk specifically about badgewatch.org, which is one of our major projects that is directly pertinent to police brutality and basically police accountability, as our fellow Carlos Martinez has described today. We're going to go a little bit into the history and methodology of the organization, as long as talking a little bit about a few projects and how we've created our success in kind of helping level the playing field for citizens as it relates to some really major public issues. So who are we? Code for South Florida is the region's only nonprofit dedicated to civic technology. So Miami-Dade, Broward, and West Palm, we're the largest organization dedicated to civic technology. Civic technology is anything, for the definition that I gave is civic technology is any piece of technology or technology solution that supports civic engagement, supports public services, or supports government and resident feedback. We started as a Code for America brigade in the early 2010s, and eventually we evolved into a nonprofit when we said, hey, we can create, using the community that we've built over the years, we can, with the support of our community over the years, we can create lasting impact if we transform our operation into a nonprofit, and we actually secure grants with paid staff to maintain these projects. We had and so many of our initiatives had no local president, so nobody in our region had done what we've done before. And everything we've done so far is really breaking ground in terms of creating the technology for social impact as an organization. So some of our projects, localair.org is the city of Miami's first air quality sensor fleet. It's basically supported by an open data portal that allows researchers, journalists, and storytellers to see this data. There are 10 sensors placed along the downtown Miami. They're basically collecting several bits of air quality data. It was the first IoT pilot, and it kind of helped the city of Miami understand some of the nuances of implementing IoT devices. We also worked on something called getyourrefund.org. This was a national initiative by our partners Code for America. What it was is a volunteer income tax assistance program for remote tax filing. This is VITA, Volunteer Income Tax Assistance, or VITA. It's usually a program, is a grant program that the IRS gives to nonprofits already providing social services to help low-income residents file for taxes with certified help. It's usually an in-person process, but in the wake of the pandemic, of course, this became a lot more difficult for nonprofits. So when we saw Code for America use this tool, we said, how about we bring it to Miami for local nonprofits to use it over here? We turned a 2-month onboarding process into 2 weeks, and by the first month, we had 5 different nonprofits using the tool, and by the end of the tax season, Florida had produced $1.5 million in returns through the tool. Which all we really did was onboard some of our fellow Good Samaritans who were working in the social impact space to use a new piece of technology, and that's the impact that we brought. Another project is called People Budget, which is participatory budgeting tool. We trained some Miami-Dade college students across 2 cohorts to create a prototype for participatory budgeting. And through that, we managed to teach the students how to solve big social problems and how to while also working with the professional team and kind of learning about the product development lifecycle and developing technology solutions. But our main flagship project for today, which is badgewatch.org, what we did was that we created a searchable database of police complaints that is directly filed with the Civilian Investigative Panel from the City of Miami. And what this kind of allows residents to do is that in the same way that a police officer, a law enforcement officer, can run your ID through their systems and see every single infraction that you've committed over the course of basically your entire lifetime as a resident or citizen, it actually works as a counter check in a way that you can run their badge number or their names, and you can see the amount of complaints that civilians have filed against them. And what this enables you to do is that it gives you the power to actually engage in a conversation with your fellow citizens, or with your fellow, with your lawyers and whoever really is a part of the justice system, to say, hey, there's a pattern here with a specific police officer, and I feel like I've been wrong. You could even argue that you've been wrongfully convicted or charged of a certain infraction. And you can even cite the pattern of, I'm not sure if this would serve as an actual legal defense. The lawyers in the room can definitely provide that, but it also serves as a form of accountability and checks and balances from the citizens to law enforcement officers. So let's do a quick demo of the product. So over here, you can actually see. Can you still see my screen, by the way?
No, I can't see it now. It went away.
Okay, let me restart. So over here, okay. So over here, I've already logged in, but you can check. You can go to beta.badgewatch.org, and you'll actually be able to see. You'll actually be able to access the tool. All you really have to do is put in your email. It doesn't record your email. It just records your. It's just a way to send you the pin so you can access the tool. But if you actually sort through the tool over here, you're able to see the different badge numbers, and you can also see, the number of citizen complaints. You can see the number of the use of force incidents, and you can actually have a direct link to the actual documents of the actual complaints. So using this, you can actually take a look at the data that's been, that's been presented to the Civil Investigative Panel. This was all uploaded by hand with the help of a reporter. But you can browse, and you can basically see, if you feel like you've been either, wrongfully charged with some sort of infraction, or you want to just look up that ticket that you felt was very suspicious that you got that ticket, or you saw a cop misbehaving in some sort of way, you can go into this database and see if they're a part of those, if they have complaints filed against them. So it's not a complicated tool. It's it's a front end that searches through a long database of police complaints, and then it actually, you can see the links over here into the to look at the actual cases and the actual information, the actual documents. So let's go back to the presentation. Okay, stop share over here. So let's go back to the presentation really quick. 1 second while I figure out my way around. Over here, okay. Working through this. Okay. So in a great act of vulnerability, I'm going to share my desktop. Back to the slideshow. So it's a very quick overview of the tool. You're free to access it, like I said, badgewatch.org. It's free for the public to use as of now. It's still very much in the beta stages, and it's mostly a prototype that we released over the course of a very short time. But just to give you an overview of the timeline and how we came to the project, right in January and March, before we had our prior experience with working around like police brutality cases, we had some students from Florida International University, from FIU UPE, Upsilon Pi Epsilon, and they're a computer science student society, and they were actually worked on a prototype for machine learning, using machine learning to parse through social media and actually pick up cases of police brutality that were being posted on social media. That was during the January and March period, right before the pandemic. We did a demo day with them, and right after that in May, we had the George Floyd protests that were sparked after we saw, of course, George Floyd being wrongfully murdered by law enforcement officers. That was basically the spark of the entire conversation around police brutality that we all saw last year, and the reason, and a very big part of why we're all here today. In September, and in that same period, we had a local reporter who had access to the police complaint data reach out to us, and he said, hey, how can we turn this into how can we actually publish this data in a way that people can sort through, in a way that is useful for people? So in the matter of the process to actually define what the tool is going to do, what the tool is going to look like, took maybe about a couple of weeks, and actually building the tool took a matter of less than 48 hours. But in October, finally, the Badgewatch was released to the public, and in November, shortly after, we got our first hate mail on like, why are we dealing on something political? We're supposed to be a nonprofit, focusing on technology. And the truth is that that's the point where we discovered that even though technology itself is an apolitical force, the way that you implement it is in itself a political statement. And in our case, it was a statement for enforcing further accountability of police and the empowerment of citizens who might feel like they've been wrongfully convicted or receive wrongful convictions or infractions. So, like I said, badgewatch.org is the URL. Feel free to check it out. It's very easy to access and to take a look around. It's not a complicated tool, but it's a tool that within its context and within its moment is something that can spark citizens to really take actions and represent themselves in the face of injustice. So how do we do this work, right? I think one of the biggest things that is very important around technology that the private sector has done really well is kind of establish methodologies for developing rapidly growing solutions in companies. And when we, as technologists, when we look at these methodologies and we want to apply them to social justice, we said, well, we need a consistent methodology by which individual hackers or individual technologists can go out into their communities and discover the issues that their communities are dealing with, and eventually create solutions or create systems that can support the nonprofits and advocates on the ground. But the way that it starts, it's a very simple, we call it civic hacking. It's a civic hacking methodology. We usually tell this in a quick talk called Civic Hacking 101, where first, what you have to do is that you need to unite people in a public interest issue. This is a very fundamental step, and it's probably something we're all familiar with, especially people already working within civic engagement and social justice spaces. Unite people on a public interest issue. Then you establish a common understanding of the issue or the problem. You have a clear definition of the problem. What are the different touch points? What's the experience of, for example, recently the recent release on the way to restore their voting rights? What's their experience like? What's the experience of receiving a wrongful, infraction, or receiving a bad treatment for a police officer? What's that experience like? And what is the problem? What are the usual patterns around the problem? The third step is to evaluate your existing resources and context, right? In our case, we were very lucky to have a resource that said, hey, I literally have the data in my hands right now because I have relationships with the actual city officials that handle this data, and I would like to let you publish it. And of course, we had previous experience, and we also have previous experience developing searchable databases. So we put all that together, and then that's kind of how Badgewatch was, how we created Badgewatch. But based on those resources, based on the existing resources and the existing, existing relationships, you will identify opportunities and touch points that can improve with technology solutions. And that could be anything as simple as releasing the data and creating a searchable portal, to creating a dedicated platform or a dedicated space to share information and share data or create new services. In the same way that, for example, Get Your Refund created a remote text filing tool, the same way that Badgewatch became a searchable database. You identify those opportunities, you define those opportunities, and you develop the solutions, particularly with localized impact, because at the local level, it's very important that you consider what is your context as a technologist, and how do people generally interact with your tools and interact with the public issues. So it's a very simple framework. And I would say you don't have to start at any specific step, but it's the most important thing is that you have a well-defined problem, and that you just go fill in the blanks as you go within, carrying on conversations and gathering feedback from the people actually on the ground doing this work. This all kind of fits into a greater theory of change that we have for, from the scope of civic hacking and developing a civic technology ecosystem. And we believe that our theory, that actual systemic change, the way that it starts is really with the civic engagement of technologists and connecting them to advocates and change makers on the ground, actually creating the impact that we want. A lot of people say, hey, I want to change the world. Great, you want to change the world? You want to create technology solutions that are going to kind of change the landscape of your community. Maybe it's not, maybe you're not going to change the whole country or the whole world, but maybe you want to do something about something that's happening in your community. There are most likely people already on the ground doing that work and making that change happen in their own ways. And as a technologist, the most important thing that you can do is contribute those technology skills to kind of build solutions that can scale and support that impact, and basically make your nonprofits and advocates a lot more efficient into what they're already doing. But for that, you have to be civically engaged and get engaged with the issues that are actually around you and around your community. The second layer of the theory of change is smart cities. And by smart cities, we mean that the establishment of sharing and transparency practices around public domain data. This can take the form of, like, for example, badgewatch.org, which is an open data portal for police complaints, but it can also take the form of, for example, maybe you have an open budget and a budget dashboard that shows how the city of Miami is spending, how your city is spending the data, and maybe that data has an API that lets developers connect with the different bits and pieces of that data to create their own solutions and their own visualizations. And principle there is to have an open data portal that can enable developers, technologists, and advocates alike to interact with public data. And ultimately, the last bit is what we call digital transformation. But we don't consider digital transformation necessarily the implementation of technology, but rather the creation of the establishment and development of cultures of continuous innovation. This is more about the people and institutions bit, where you can have groups of communities and institutions working together to continuously innovate on the technologies and the methodologies that we're using on the ground to address some of these really, really pressing issues to which nobody really has the right answers to, but we're all working really hard to figure out. So At its core, Badgewatch.org and pretty much all the other projects that we presented here, they're all examples of empathy, autonomy, and collaboration in action. You don't have to be a technologist necessarily. You don't have to know how to code something to really make an impact in your community, but you can contribute in the same way. For example, this reporter that had the data came up to us and said, hey, what can we do with this together? It's a matter of understanding where people are coming from with the problems in our community. It's a matter of taking independent and autonomous action without waiting for permission, because of when there's something very important happening in your community, someone has to address it. And working with people already on the ground and people who already have a passion, interest, and the skills to work in these spaces and these issues, just come together with them and make something really, really special happen. Get involved with local change makers, find out who's working already in those issues, and think about your own skill sets and your own abilities, whether that is you're a data scientist, you're a designer, you're a reporter, a storyteller, you're a lawyer. No matter who you are, you're a part of this larger process of change. You just have to figure out how you contribute and how you want to contribute. And of course, if you have any questions about civic technology, maybe you have your own civic technology solution already on the ground, please feel free to email me. I'm an open door when it comes to creating change in our communities. These are the conversations that we always have to have and embrace. So feel free to email me just if you have any comments, questions, or concerns about Gulf for South Florida, or maybe about your own civic tech practice, or just questions about technology in general. I'm an open door, and thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you, Livio. That was a great presentation. For everybody, we're going to be doing a Q&A after Alana's presentation, but Livio, thank you for that. I think it shows the importance of the process and the methodology for applying civic tech to our social justice issues that we're facing. So really very important. And I loved your idea about continuous innovation. And I think that's really important. So Alana, would you like to tell us a little bit more from the organizational side about the Community Justice Project and your work?
Sure. Yeah. So we're movement lawyers, artists, and researchers that are dedicated to just backing up organizers. When people are organizing around racial justice, we try to bring whatever tools we have at our disposal to further their campaigns and the demands they're putting forward. And we're not technologists, but what we found is we've had an incredible opportunity to work with technologists like Code for South Florida, folks like justfix.nyc, and even some lawyers who are just trying to figure this out on their own. And so I wanted to start actually by sharing a little bit piece of work that isn't as technology based as some of these other things, and then how we grew from there. And that's because I think technology is this incredible tool that we can really use, but I think we have to be really aware that it cannot be the only way we're getting things out. The folks we work with are often elderly, may not speak English as a first language, or just don't have internet access or a computer at home. Maybe they're only accessing it through their cell phone or talking through WhatsApp, but might not know how to deal with a complicated web form. And so really thinking about what the user experience is on a real level, especially in moments of crisis, right? Whether it's a hurricane or you got an eviction notice on your door in the middle of a pandemic, what do you do with that? And so I'm gonna share my screen really quickly. This is a cartoon. We worked with an artist to kind of just, during the pandemic, both the federal law and our state law around eviction has changed pretty much every month since we got it. Actually, between last night and today, we need to update this document because the federal eviction moratorium has been extended another month. And many of the changes required proactive steps in order to be protected from eviction. And so one of the things we found is that even though we had these big changes, we had rent assistance, we had protections for tenants, things that were coming down at the policy level, they weren't making a meaningful impact if people didn't know about them or know how to use them. And what it took for people to really know how to use things was outreach, was knocking on people's doors, was talking to people in spaces where they already were congregating, whether that meant with their church, in places they were going to pick up food, and most importantly, in the community-based organizations we worked with, folks like Miami Worker Center on this issue in particular. And so we've updated this a number of times, but this is just a kind of a brief overview of what are the steps if you're facing eviction during this pandemic that you need to know about and what you need to do to take action. And we hope not only take action for your case, but take action for your community, right? Be part of something bigger by joining an organization like Miami Worker Center or a state formation, the Florida Housing Justice Alliance. But this would not, the big problem with the law around eviction and the process of dealing with the courts is that if you don't have a lawyer, which very small percentage of people are able to get a lawyer to deal with these evictions, doing what you need to do to navigate through that process feels like an insurmountable task for most folks. And it's not built as an accessible procedure. You need to know, say, file a certain piece of paper with all these legalese terms that don't make sense, even just to be able to get a hearing. You're not guaranteed a hearing with a judge. And in fact, very few, only about 1 in 10 eviction cases will see a judge before a judgment's issued. And so we wanted to intervene, especially now that there are these new protections, to make sure people could use this information to move forward. And so we were able to work with the very, very beginning of the pandemic, able to work with incredible volunteers at Code for South Florida who threw down at no cost to like our tiny little organization to build out this Florida evictionprotection.org website, which did a few things. One, some of the federal protections said you cannot be evicted. They can't even file eviction against you if you live in certain types of housing. And if you live in public housing or if you have a Section 8 voucher, sure, you know that. But do you know if your landlord has a federally backed mortgage? Do you know if they asked for a forbearance this month? Do you know if they got a tax credit 20 years ago? Chances are you don't know that, right? And so actually, so there was a database out there. We had partners at the University of Florida who for a long time had been building a database, but not in a format that was easy for a layperson just dealing with a crisis to access. And so built this incredible tool, pulled together databases, and actually were able to roll this out before there were national resources to do so. So that this protection could actually be useful. People could see, hey, I know I'm on this map. I can print this out. I can bring this to court and say, I should be protected. We also built out a system. The other thing that was going on was that different counties were doing all different things and it was changing week by week. And so all these little dots you see are different points at the eviction process that different counties were stopping or starting, and it was different everywhere. And there wasn't a uniform way to even say what's going on, what can I expect next, what part of this process is moving, what's paused. And it was so important to know that, because if in Florida, if you don't answer within 1 week or post money that they say is due within 1 week, you lose all your rights to keep going. And so knowing whether that timeline was moving or paused was really vital. Unfortunately, right now, the system is back up and running in ways that are acting on so many tenants in really harmful ways. But being able to kind of go through each county in the state, we had interns that were pulling, whether it was different judges who were pausing parts of the court, whether it was sheriffs who were saying we're not enforcing evictions at this time, or federal rules that were coming down, and update that, and people knew locally what was going on in their county in a live way. We also worked with we got a chance to work with really great folks in New York at JustFix and NYC and the Right to the City Coalition nationally, to help build out this norent.org site. That's a multilingual site where folks were able to click on a link, put in some basic information, and generate a letter that as the pandemic evolved, many places required you to show that you were impacted by COVID if you wanted to be protected. And so put together a standard letter where people could be able to print that out, send it to a landlord, and be able to show that in court that they had met that burden. And then we had some friends in Jacksonville Legal Aid who realized that we're not going to have enough lawyers for the number of people facing this, and you need to be able to write these highly legalistic arguments in order to even get through the first rounds in court. And so they put together this answer generator that leads people through a series of questions and prints out that document that really can get signal to the judge that they need to take the time to have a hearing with you. We've now been working with them to get this translated into Haitian Creole and into Spanish, so it's more accessible. And one thing we noticed is that all of these sites have definitely been useful for a portion of like the tenants who are accessing this, but they've been really useful as training tools for intermediate groups. So things like community organizers who are knocking on doors, legal aid lawyers themselves. I find myself using this eviction answer when I'm in a clinic rather than starting from scratch and drafting. and folks who are out there helping others navigate these systems. And so really have been a really essential tool. And I think now that just because the pandemic in some ways is waning, doesn't mean the particular crisis of eviction, it will be behind us. And so really wanting to figure out how do we make these tools sustainable and usable in the future. And on the advocacy side, I just have to shout out our folks at University of Miami, University of Florida. They've been helping us collect data and one of the things on the advocacy side is how do we use technology to we have all these massive data sets now of we know which landlords have been massive victors, what neighborhoods are really impacted by this, which counties have had really different experiences during the pandemic. And so really being able to display this, we had a really good experience with Data Wrapper and Airtable who've given us free credits and things to work with. But just really appreciated all the technologists who've been working during this period to support advocacy groups, and would love to keep collaborating and finding ways to make sure the work that's happening on the ground has all the resources it needs to succeed.
That's great, Alana. What was that? You said Data Wrapper for that last one?
Yeah, datawrapper.de. It's a really great visualization service that was for a lay non-statistician, non-technologist to learn, has been a godsend.
That's great. We were we did a data visualization session last week, so I was just throwing that out there. That was the new one that we didn't have on the list. So that's great. So I just put up, do you have questions for Livio or Alana? I've got you've got the chat window there. You've got the Q&A window. Feel free to put them in there. I do have one question that came in, Alana, during your presentation. Somebody says, I love the eviction protection site. Who were your partners on that project again?
Yeah, so many. So we had, so Code for South Florida really built it out. They had incredible folks that spent so many hours doing this. I could not be more grateful for their support and their effort. That was really awesome. And then on the back end, we had legal services attorneys from across the state that were helping get us the information to populate that. And really a huge amount of support and just lack of ego from the folks at University of Florida who were just happy to freely share their database and let it live on these other places of what those housing that would have qualified for these programs were. So, and I'm probably forgetting other folks that threw down. It was really such a group effort.
Yeah, I would actually love to add that a lot of those volunteers, in our case, we didn't necessarily come into the project and say, oh, we're Code for South Florida, we're going to lead this project, we're going to lead a development. What really happened was that, when Alana kind of reached out to us, and there was also, I think his name is, it was also Greg Bloom, who is a consistent advocate of local causes. He's amazing. We didn't really come in to lead the technology discussion. We just kind of said, hey, we just reached out to a few volunteers and we said, hey, do you want to work on this? And they said yes. And what was most amazing about this project is that there wasn't necessarily a lead in the project. It was a group of really passionate volunteers and really passionate people who were very, very passionate about what they were doing. And I said, hey, let's make some really fantastic change happen, which is where our values are, empathy, autonomy, and collaboration. Again, eviction protection being an example of those values at work.
And just to shout out, Greg's work, I think what was so important there, as someone who doesn't speak the language of coding or of product development, to have, he really served as kind of an internal organizer and intermediary to translate translate what we were thinking on the ground to something that the volunteers could really take and run with, and help, and really shepherded that process in a way that we're so thankful for.
This is a question for Code for South. So can you discuss the People Budget project and its impact?
So the participatory budgeting tool, it's called peoplebudget.org. So just to give a quick description of participatory budgeting, it's a process by which the local municipalities, usually, that they'll publish their existing budget proposals. So any changes or legislations or proceedings taking place around the budget, around the city's budget, and how the budget is going to be spent, they post it publicly so that residents can actually come and comment on how they feel about the about the individual proposal. So a people budget was supposed to be, it's a tool that that basically, if you've been on Reddit, you can, it works a lot like Reddit, but for budget proposals, where you can post an individual proposal with the information for what it would do, what it's supposed to do, and then residents would be able to kind of upvote or downvote the proposals and actually comment on them. The tool was in a beta for a minute, and as of now, because our focus has kind of shifted around a little bit during the process of the tool. It's not a tool that we wound up publishing, but it's a tool that we use to teach students how to add new features, how to develop new features onto a public interest technology solution. And it kind of became a case study of how people with very little experience in coding can actually create something new that is, that is relevant to their communities and can actually solve big problems.
Yeah, and also I know that Code for South is a relatively new organization. So how has technology helped with the startup of the organization?
I mean, we're technologists. Everyone who's been on our staff has been on some level involved or connected to technology, whether they're marketers or developers themselves. I'm also a developer. So like we have a very solid understanding of technology, and in a way that has let us be very, very efficient with our time, because we're still a very new organization, pretty much new kids on the block, as I like to say. We've had to be very, very efficient with our resources, and our inherent knowledge of technology has allowed us to do a lot with very, very little. But even then, to scale some of these projects, and part of the reason why People Budget isn't a live project as of yet is because developing, doing knowledge-based work is very, very expensive at its core. And, and volunteering is also a very, very big privilege. In order to have time to volunteer, it implies that you don't have to use that time to sustain yourself and to survive in a way that a lot of residents are in our own cities. So, the call in that sense is to really be able to have paid volunteers is something that we've always strived for, because knowledge work is very, very expensive, and it's not something that is very easily accessible for free. And of course, at a local level, there's still great opportunities and great strides to do in terms of funding and sustainability around these projects. But it's something that we're navigating every single day. And we see a lot of potential for individual community members who are also tech enabled to really make an impact with the right knowledge in their hands, the right knowledge and the right tool in their hands.
That's great. And we have a question that came in from Carla, who says, what's next for Community Justice Project? Not to put you on the spot, Alana.
Yeah, I mean, I think on this side, we're really looking at what it means to keep to not let these narratively, advocacy wise, and like from how we use this technology, not let the end of the pandemic just kind of shut the doors on access that people may have gained. And so we really want to. So we're really looking to. We would love to see the fill out your eviction site actually be able to connect to the court system. I think that's a long-term goal. The court systems may not be ready to work with us yet, but ways, because filing is such a crazy experience and so difficult. So I think that would be a really amazing outcome, and just look for other ways. We're going to keep evolving with our community partners too. I think they're looking at, a lot of folks are looking at what big corporate landlords are doing right now. They're buying up homes that are distressed and then evicting folks once they're renting there. And so really taking a look at how we put a spotlight on that.
All right. Well, thank you both for joining us. I think it was a great discussion, and showed technology mixing with social justice from two different angles. And yeah, I really appreciate it. Do any of you have any final thoughts or comments you'd like to make?
Yeah, sure. I am. I also wanted to be a lawyer because I saw the potential that it had to really like make a difference in people's lives. If it helps for corporations dodge taxes and fees for like polluting our environments and wrongful what's the word I'm looking for, planned obsolences and all that sorts of things. If it can help corporations do that, like what happens when you help a group of people, whether they're marginalized or they're facing a really big pressing problem in their communities, what happens when you help them that way? And I really chose technology because it has a really big opportunity to scale. But that has also taught me in this experience is that anyone can really make a very big difference in their communities or in the lives of other people if you just make that your mission. Not necessarily to make money, not necessarily to just learn a skill, but if your intent is to really serve your communities and find a way to make a change, the best thing you can do is look at what's around you and see who else is already doing the work and impacting the areas that you are passionate about, and see how you can contribute as an individual. You don't have to wait to get a law degree. You don't have to wait to learn all the different 1,000-ish JavaScript frameworks that are out there. All it takes is the right passion, a little bit of know-how, and figuring out in what way you can contribute that is unique to you, that is going to move the needle just a little bit further. Whether that is creating a tool for lawyers, whether that is creating publishing a database, whether that is telling a story or writing a podcast or an article about an issue you care about. There's always ways to contribute. You just gotta have to find your way around. And if eventually you want to be a civic hacker or a technologist or a lawyer, you can always aspire to that. But if you want to start today, just look at who's working with you, who's already working on these issues, and see how you can help them.
That's great. And sorry, I made a lawyer joke earlier, or I attempted to. Sorry, sorry, Carlos. All right.
No problem. I give them myself.
All right. Well, thank you both, and really appreciate it. Have a great weekend, and yeah, thanks again for taking time out of your busy schedules to join us today.
Thank you all so much for hosting this.
Take care.
Thank you.
All right, so we're getting ready to jump into social media for activists, but before we do that, I want to share this link here. And this is our grants program. So we have a small grants program that provides up to $2,000. It's not a lot, but this is just for Miami. We've got a few weeks. We're taking applications until July 11th. We'll notify everybody on the 18th, but these are $2,000 grants to apply media, technology, data to social justice issues. So the issues you're already working on, this can expand out something you're already working on, an existing project with media, data, and technology tools, or it can be a brand new idea that you have. So take a look at that link. I'll send it around later as well, but you can see that it's a very short application process, and there's not too much to do to apply for that. So without further ado, hey, Ashley, what's going on?
Hi there. Had a little bit of technical difficulties, but we are all good.
Oh, great.
I'm glad to be with you guys this morning.
Yeah,
How are you guys?
Perfect timing. Oh, we're doing really well.
Good.
Yeah. So I'm gonna just introduce Ashley real quick. I read an article she put together with Hootsuite a couple months ago about the do's and don'ts of social media activism and just all the lessons learned in that space. And I just thought it would be perfect for this group. We've been looking at social media activism as kind of, early on back in 2010, 11, people were thinking it was overhyped, that it was optional for brands. But then we see, starting in 2018 with Colin Kaepernick, with the murder of George Floyd being a catalyst, that companies are no longer being neutral, especially on their social media. So I wanted to bring Ashley in and have her talk to you about kind of how to apply social media to kind of, for outreach, for scaling your organization, to getting the word out. And anyway, with that, I'll turn it over to you, Ashley. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you. I love that. Okay. Let me see if I can share my screen.
Oh, there you go. Looks like it's coming up. Yep.
No, I think I shared the wrong thing. I don't know how to stop it. There we go. Okay. That's perfect. Okay. So good morning, everybody. I am Ashley. I'm your speaker for today. By day, like Tim mentioned, I am a social media consultant at Hootsuite, which is a social media management company. A little bit about myself. I have lived, studied, worked across 3 continents. So I consider myself like a global citizen. And I think that really has helped me become like a more empathy focused marketer. I try to help my clients really get smarter about the strategies that they employ on social to connect with their audiences, and achieve their organizational objectives. And by night, I consider myself a reality TV fanatic. So very much a Real Housewives fan. I'm currently watching Too Hot to Handle, and I will be watching Love Island as soon as it starts. So uh, I'm very excited to be joining with you guys today, and hopefully, at the end of the session, you guys can walk away with some lofty goals and some realistic first steps for how to approach, social as a social justice organization. And this is just, what we have on the agenda to help you get to that state. So we're going to talk a little bit about social media activism, what it is, the benefits, some successful movements, Slacktivism, which are the critiques of social media activism, talking about if they're valid or not. And then we're going to take a step back, talk about where to start when it comes to posting and that sort of thing. And then finally talk about some, 5 best practices from other social justice organizations or movements. And then we can wrap up with some Q&A. Does that sound good to everybody? Love it. So what is social activism? Let us dive in. Well, social media activism is a form of protest or advocacy for a cause that uses social media channels. And oftentimes, because hashtags play, a really central role in mobilizing movements, the term is used interchangeably with hashtag activism. So maybe you've heard either or. Now, I want the session to be a little interactive, so I have a couple questions for you in the presentation, and this is the first. So you could use like your camera, take, what do you call it, and hover over that QR code, or you could go to slido.com and enter this code on the screen. And the question for you guys is, do you know what the first social media activism, to start the ball rolling was? Was it the California immigration protest, the Colombian Las FARC protest? Was it Black Lives Matter? Was it Occupy Wall Street? Or was it the Arab Springs? Okay, you see somebody saying Occupy Wall Street. Mhm. That is one of the first memories that I do have of social media activism. California immigration protests. Okay. Black Lives Matter. Okay. None of the same answers, which is interesting. Okay. One more for California immigration protest. Okay. You know what? That is actually the right answer. So, in late March 2006, a couple of high school students in the Los Angeles area were using text to organize a classroom walkout because they were opposed to some of the changes that were being made to the US immigration law. And so then a couple of other teens reached out to some students in the California Central Valley region on MySpace, and they inspired another 1,000 students to join the walkout in Fresno. And that was really the pioneer for the phenomenon that we know as social activism today. But that was the first. From the mouth of babes or something, isn't that a saying? But does this even work, right? I want to talk a little bit about some of the critiques for this type of social media involvement. And I've heard them all. So slacktivism is a term that combines like the word slacker and activism, right? It talks about like, like the rudimentary actions on digital platforms that people use to support like an issue. And it usually involves little to no effort in the part of the on the part of the participants. So people often talk about Slacktivism when they speak about like signing online petitions, copying like social media network statuses, like that sort of thing. And their mindset is, okay, these petitions, sure, they gather tens of thousands of signatures quickly, but like they're unlikely to be more effective at swaying an elected representative's vote than like a crowd of in the flesh constituents presenting their requests and pleas in person. That's their opinion. In essence, what they're saying is like that these social activism movements, it's just merely like for participant gratification because they lack engagement and commitment, and they fail to produce tangible effects in terms of like promoting a cause. And I think that's interesting. One of the prime examples of slacktivism that I often give is or perception of slacktivism rather. I don't want to offend anybody who works for Starbucks. But it was the Starbucks Race Together campaign, right? I don't know if anybody remembers it, but it got so much public backlash and mockery just because people thought it was insincere. And for those of us who need a reminder, so Starbucks wanted to spark discussions about the topics of race following the death of Michael Brown and Eric Gardner, two unarmed Black men. And they announced that Starbucks baristas would write #RaceTogether on cups, and they would engage in discussion around race relations if they were asked about it. Of course, some people were like, this is misguided. How can you have a meaningful conversation about race at a busy Starbucks while I'm getting my coffee? I will just like a flat white, please. Thank you. While other people were like, this is just like an opportunistic marketing ploy on the part of Starbucks. So there was so much negativity, so much so that the senior vice president of their global communications, like he had to delete his account off Twitter. Like that was how, I guess, the lambasted he was by criticism. And I know we've heard about like greenwashing and woke washing and every kind of washing. So this is just an example of that. And I want to ask you guys another question. How do you think most people perceive social media activism? Do they think it moves the needle, or does it not even make a difference? And to answer the question, it's the same procedure. Either hover over with your camera and over the QR code with your camera, or join us at slido.com and enter the code on the screen. Okay. So the question is, what do most people think about social media activism? Some people think it moves the needle. Some people think it doesn't make a difference. Oh, wow. Wow. So all of our participants for this poll think that it moves the needle, which is great. But the truth is that there are varying perceptions of #activism. 64% of Americans agree that social, gives a voice to the underrepresented groups, sure. But they don't think that speaking out is effective, right? On the contrary, like 71% of people are skeptics. Like this large subset of people are thinking, social media makes people believe that they're making a difference when they're actually not. And I think for popular movements like Black Lives Matter, where obviously performative allyship is everywhere. I think the burden of proof is on these individuals and companies that want to involve themselves in the discussion, but nonprofit organizations can issue clear directives that help them showcase their authenticity, just so that some people know where to start. I think sometimes that is a concern that I've heard from the layman, is that they just don't know how to speak up or get involved. And I'll speak a little bit about that a little bit later. So, are the critiques valid? I personally think that the Slacktivism critique is very short-sighted. Like it doesn't really take into account the benefits of social activism. And if you were to ask me what benefits, actually, I would say the first one I would want to highlight is around the fact that social media allows individuals to really express experiences and opinions relating to collective causes. And obviously it brings like eyeballs on the issues in question. And obviously with the user base of these platforms, those eyeballs could belong to authorities or ministries or politicians, what have you, people who ordinarily would have been a little bit more difficult to reach. And, the second benefit is we have this phenomenon known as vigilantism. Some people want to call it cancel culture or whatever. It's very similar to vigilantism, where perceived norm transgressions are exposed and publicly sanctioned. It's a place where you can hold people accountable, as we saw in the Me Too movement, right? I think also people are able to like involve others outside of their online community to like collectively negotiate their new shared realities, and it can empower communities, as we saw with like hashtag free the nipples, where women would post topless photos and they try to like normalize unsexualized representations of the female torso. So feminists have a viewpoint, and they're trying to negotiate what is and is not acceptable in the wider public and reclaim that the female bod, in a sense. Another benefit is that there are studies that show that small online actions can ease people into more costly offline action, right? Offline activism may cultivate like psychological preconditions that can embolden individuals to really embrace maybe a more burdensome form of offline protest. So because social media fosters things like morality, or the alignment of like morality and solidarity and self-efficacy and unfairness, it's a great platform in order to be that gateway. And then lastly, we have interpersonal mobilization of, or we could call it by its scientific name, which is FOMO. If when other people are speaking out on an issue, you want to get involved in the conversation as well. And I think we see that in a lot of issues. So that's the end goal. But most of us, I think, are at ground zero. So what we're gonna do is shift gears right now and speak about how you guys can get some of your accounts off the ground. So what you need to do to grow your followers and what you need to be posting. Okay. So if you are going to be engaging with your audiences effectively, you need to know like what sort of party you're going to be throwing. I think this is a great way to like visualize what networks are used for what purposes. So we're going to try to figure out what sort of party we're throwing and who we're inviting to our party. So if we're going to be on LinkedIn, that's more of a trade show. So it's more for like professional networking and connection building, think thought leadership, think industry trends. Twitter is a little bit more of a cocktail party, you know, in the moment content, breaking news, live events, timely, relevant updates. Facebook is more of a dinner party. So that's when you're trying to share like interesting stories and like relevant information, but in a very casual way. And then Instagram is a digital gallery. So you're doing the same thing. You're sharing interesting stories, relevant information in a casual way, but it's more curated, it's more visual. This is where images are the star of the show, right? And I just wanted to include this really handy cheat sheet on the differentiators between social networks. If this is useful for you, I suggest that you like take a screenshot or take out your phone and snap a picture. This table just looks at like the ideal length of a post, the ideal number of hashtags, and the ideal number of like times you should post per week. But I do want to stress that this is not like a hard and fast rule. It's just like guidelines when you're looking to get started. Social media is both art and science, and sometimes it gets a little bit frustrating. But the science bit comes in with your analytics. So you're gonna test this out, see how it works with your audience, and if they prefer, you know, 10 hashtags on Instagram, then that's what I suggest you stick to. It's all about experimentation. And in terms of like how often you should be posting per week, which is often another question that I get, it's like regular posting is going to drive audience growth and engagement. So you want to focus on building like a regular cadence. So I would say aim for like 2 posts per week. And this is really important because you can grow your followers, I think, 2 times faster just by posting every single week consistently compared to somebody who posts like less than once a week. So as you build like capacity, you can post more, of course. And I often see my really successful clients posting at least once a day. Uh, Again, this is only if you have that capacity. And there was an analysis by, I think the company is called Tailwind, and they found that daily posting will make you grow followers 4 times faster than posting less than once a week. And that makes sense because you're getting more visibility, right? But I do want to issue a little warning here because it is worth noting that there is such a thing as posting too often, like sharing too much. And if you share too much, obviously, well, inevitably, the quality is going to go down. And people often suspect that you're a bot or something. So it's not ideal when you're trying to like humanize your brand, you know. But in moderation, posting at a consistent rate really helps keep your content top of mind, and it gives your audience like more opportunity to see your content. Um, a big challenge is knowing what to post, and we're going to cover that in a couple of slides. Don't worry, I got you. So again, choosing consistency over frequency. If you don't have the time to post every day, that's okay. It's just most focus on like getting that regular, consistent cadence. That is priority number uno. And you know, both of these examples, people have posted 12 times per month. So in the 2 calendars on your screen, that's what I'm showing you. So that probably adds up to what, 3 times per week? God help me, I'm bad at math. But in the green calendar, it's spaced out and the posts are like evenly, consistently spread out. Whereas, you know, in the red calendar, I think they got excited and posted every day for a week and then ran out of steam and didn't post anything for a long period. And it was like, oh, I'm ready again. So my advice is just pace yourself and aim for, you know, at least 2 posts per week and then build up steam from there. Because one of these calendars was more successful than the other, and it was the green calendar.
Hey,
So
Ashley, do you have any rules of thumb on like times a day to post? Like a lot of the groups here obviously are working on social justice issues. Should they be posting during the day, at night? Does that matter at all,
Oh.
or do you have to figure out your own audience?
that is based on the audience and when they're on online. I do when I do consulting for like different firms and stuff. One of the things that we do look at is the time that their audience is online, but that's something that's specific to the people who follow you, right? I did one with a telecommunications company, and their following was online at 6 a.m., right? So it does just depend on who's following you, um, and the culture in the region that you're in, I think.
Okay, that's great. Sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah, no. I interrupt us as much as you want. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about making your posts findable. So how do people discover your brand, essentially? Um, so new followers technically or typically come from three places. Either they're prompted through like an email or a website, or maybe in person uh, uh, visit, and they see that you have some kind of social presence, and they have been prompted to action. Or secondly, they could discover your content through hashtags, which is a popular one. Or thirdly, they see your post uh, via a friend or an influencer or something like that. um, and a big reason that people want to follow you is because of your content. So of course, it's really important to find like a balance in the content mix to make sure that your audience is happy. I think most organizations um, split the content up into four categories, whether it's educate, entertain, inspire, or promote. Educational content is like content that's meant to spark curiosity and like add to someone's knowledge bank. And you can do that through like tips or FAQs or did you knows. Entertaining content, people think entertaining, it must be funny. It doesn't always have to be funny. It's like intriguing, it keeps the audience engaged and like interested in what's coming next. The content that inspires is positive and it's memorable, and it's something that's going to stick in your viewers or audience's mind. It's meant to drive them to keep going or to tackle a problem. It's like people usually do this with like people centric stories, you know. And then lastly, promote. So promotional content, of course, is um, just like about encouraging your viewers to take the next step, and that could be like a basic tip, but one thing that I always tell my clients when I'm talking about promote is make sure you include like a call to action, and I think that's sometimes overlooked. But tell the people what you want them to do is where I'm getting at. So once you've decided what your content should do, the next question is how should it be organized. um, and we should be looking into organizing or identifying like different content themes that will help you organize what to post. And then finally we'll decipher the vehicle that this message should be delivered in, and what the best platform or post type would be to be using. And so this is just an example of how you create like content combinations. The aim here is to use different content combos to tell the best story or the best rhetoric. So sometimes you might want to use like educational content and you want to present, I don't know, Juneteenth just went. So let's talk about Juneteenth via educational. So what is Juneteenth? Let's do it on stories. And that is how we are going to be structuring that. But you could also do it entertaining with current events. So I don't know, one that reminds like a meme of, do you remember that meme of Bernie Sanders at the inauguration with him like sitting cross-legged with his mittens. Like that is entertaining. It's about a current event. Do it via a reel, right? Perfect. So now I just wanted to end on like an aspirational note, right? A lesson from our peers. And I wanted to talk about some of the 5 best practices from other social organizations, justice organizations that I've seen. So the first is coordinating community responses. So I think the aim of the game should be everybody needs to know the terms and conditions for getting involved. Like your audience needs to know exactly what they should do, why, for what cause, like everything. Um, and one organization that did this like just masterfully was the ALS organization, right? Do you guys remember the Ice Bucket Challenge of 2014? I don't even know if most people knew the term ALS before this went down. Um, and it obviously involved like somebody dumping an ice bucket, a bucket of ice water on somebody's head to promote the awareness of the condition, encourage donations to ALS research, and the challenge went viral on social media, in part due to like the nomination system. So once a person completed the challenge, they would have to nominate other people to complete it as well. If you chose not to do that, within 24 hours, you're supposed to forfeit by way of charitable donation. Um, and it was so successful, you guys. And I think in part because of like the low barrier to participation, so it didn't really take much. And like it's entertaining. I like to see an ice bucket dumped over the head of celebrities. And of course, like celebrity participation as well. And it got more than like 2.4 million tagged videos on Facebook and like $115 million in donations. So it was a transformative um, uh, campaign for the association, and it really allowed them to invest in research and like assistive technologies and like increase access to healthcare and services for people with ALS. So that is example number 1. The second best practice is platforming lived experiences. I think because many social justice organizations or causes work to build equity for minorities or underrepresented individuals and groups within societies, the stories and the struggles of minorities are often not well known or well documented or publicized, whatever you want to call it. And social can really provide a platform to amplify and share those voices with potentially like millions of people around the globe. And so that kind of exposure helps share lived experiences about like racial violence, sexual harassment, or whatever other form of like oppression that from the underrepresented. And of course, the Me Too movement is my example for this one. Uh, it is a source of solidarity for women of all backgrounds who've experienced, sexual harassment. And I shouldn't even say women. It has been for everyone. And the movement really focused around experiences of sexual violence survivors from all walks of life, by just sharing and telling stories about those things. And those who engage with the movement, obviously try to show how common um, sexual harassment was. And I think the popularization of the topic really instigated some understanding for the Me Too movement, for sexual harassment, for assault. It really, I think, reduced tolerance and abusive behaviors, rather, and I think increased support for the victims. Uh, and I think we live in a much more tolerant world because of it. My next example is Occupy Wall Street, which had a bit of a cameo earlier. And it's around like planning and promoting events. So Occupy Wall Street is like a modern example of like grassroots political movements, like actions from the power of the masses. It was operated from like a bottom level organization. Didn't really have like an official leader, but the mindset, it has like the mindset that all individuals are leaders, you know. And these protests really, they were they were spanning like multiple weeks at one point. They made like a splash like internationally um via social media. And so the location of like like each locale of the movement would establish its own set of like organizational practices, and it utilized like virtual as well as concrete spaces. It strived to revise proposals um, until like 9/10 of participants approved them. Like just the phenomenon that was created by Wall Street or Occupy Wall Street was um, unparalleled in my opinion, and like it really relied on social media to um, foster unified collective participation. You know? Okay. Okay. I think this is a little bit controversial. I completely, we call it, acknowledge that, but I think that it's, just bear with me for a second. So the reason that I'm going to be mentioning the Free Palestine movement is because this has been so effective that the opposing, I don't know, faction has been using this in order to get their messaging out, like this very same model. So social provides opportunity for the voices to be amplified, sure, but I think in many cases voices can be lost across the internet. Like there's just so much noise. So sometimes it takes like a community using like a shared feature in order to gain traction for like a post and allowing it to spread to a much wider audience. And this is what we call signal boosting. And it allows for, you know, other social media users to share just like a single message. And when it's done well, virality happens. So I don't know if you guys have seen this particular post on your social in the past month and a half, but yeah, the Free Palestine movement really understood like the areas of resistance of their target audience. They saw what confused their audience and they addressed it in their messaging. And to add to that, it's like an easily digestible medium that people can share with their followers, and you can easily understand why this kind of like meme, I guess, went viral. Like it's so powerful that the IDF started using the same kind of we call it the the same look and feel. And I don't necessarily know if people completely understand how amazing um that particular meme was, because like what we have witnessed is the shifting of what we call the Overton window. So that's like a term that's used to describe the range of subjects that mainstream media deems as publicly acceptable to discuss, right? And so social media outlets have really empowered people to express themselves and find others who share their views and really band together to break into the mainstream by force, almost. And it by promoting the spread of like unconventional knowledge, i.e., the meme that we just spoke about, individuals feel emboldened to promote unlikely arguments that maybe they would not have backed in the past, right? And we are at tip number 5. Okay, so I just want to speak about partnering with brands and influencers right now. I think we're living in a time where consumers are expecting brands to take public stances on issues around like immigration and civil rights and race relations in ways that we had not held brands to before, right? I think they said something like 70% of consumers believe that it's important for a brand to take a stand on a social issue. And I think that's really important. And I think, you know, in the latter half of like 2019, there was like a business roundtable, and some of the chief executives of like 192 large companies meet and they discuss like the purpose of a corporation. And even they decided that like the purpose of like our forefathers, like the business that they used to do, the social responsibility of a business is to increase its profits. That definition doesn't suit today's environment anymore. It's not gonna cut it. And so today's business leaders have to commit to addressing the needs of like their shareholders, but also customers, employees, suppliers, and local communities. And we've seen them try to do it before. We've seen them try to join the conversation, but sometimes they miss the mark. Sometimes, oftentimes, and I'm gonna guess that they're well-meaning. And you know, during the George Floyd protests, we saw this templated boilerplate become very popular, right? It said, "We at Brand are really committed to fighting injustice by posting images to Twitter that express our commitment to fighting injustice." And then at the bottom it says, "Brand, you know the ones," and trademark. And I just thought that was so like spot on. Now enter Aurora James, who saw the messaging from these brands in 2020 and decided to start the 15% pledge, which is a US-based nonprofit organization. I think she said she was like watching Black-owned businesses literally shut before her eyes. And then she would also see like these major retailers say, "We stand with you." And the reality is they actually didn't, because they weren't making any kind of tangible promises, like anything that would hold them accountable. So she's like, "We need to find a way for you to do what you say you're going to be doing." And so it was born from seeing like multiple acts of social injustice and police brutality in the United States, yes, but also the lack of like corporate accountability for systemic issues at play. And so she decided to call on some major retailers to dedicate 15% of their inventory space to Black-owned businesses. And so Black people, you know, account for 15% of the population in the United States, but only Black-owned, I think, brands hold 1% of shelf space. So where they do that at, the math is just not mathing. So Old Navy, I think, Sephora, The Gap, Macy's, West Elm, these are just some of the brands that have decided that they're going to be taking the pledge. And so, yeah, partnering with brands is another way to move your cause forward. Okay, so here are some of the things that we discussed today. We talked about genuine social media activism, that it's like it's usually supported by concrete actions, by donations and measurable commitments to change. The fact that small online actions can ease people into more costly offline action, and that posting consistently and making your content findable is how you're going to be growing your followers. Now, I would like to open the floor to you guys. Do you guys have any questions for me?
All right, I have anybody that has questions, you can put them in the chat pod or the Q&A pod. I've got two here right now for you, Ashley. This one is very loaded. For organizations fairly new to social media, what would you recommend? Trial and error, plan for weeks of content? Should we get started on one platform to find our voice, or launch on more than one? Thank you.
I do like the idea of starting on one and to find your voice, right? And then expanding if like that's a platform that like your audience is on. And trial and error, definitely. Let the analytics speak to you. Like I said, social media is both art and science. Um, and then what's the last part of the question?
The other one was, should they plan for like trial and error on their content or plan for weeks of content? I guess just pushing things out and just seeing what resonates and what doesn't.
Mm-hmm. Definitely plan for weeks at a time. Just because like sometimes you get bogged down. I would use a social media management solution like a Hootsuite just to plan and get everything out of the way. And the good thing about using things like that is, sure, you don't have to think about it when you're in the moment. It's almost like a set it and forget it. But should anything arise, like a current event that you just can't plan for, you can pause that content, and save it for when whatever we're talking about is out of the news.
That's great. And the other question that came in is, are there any best practices, reports, lessons learned that you've seen from working with youth, teenagers on social media?
I have read a couple of reports about how Gen Zs tend to organize on social. I know TikTok is a favorite for them. I don't know if you guys have seen or if you remember. I think Trump was trying to hold a rally, and a couple of Gen Zers decided that they were gonna buy all of his the seats at that rally or something like that, or book them rather. Maybe it's not for sale, and made him speak to an empty stadium. There are a couple of reports that I could get to you, hopefully.
Yeah, and we'll share those out if when you send them, Ashley. Thank you very much for that. Any other questions? You can put those in the chat pod. I love that last comment that you have there, Ashley, about figuring out if you're on the right track. Like, what are the reasons why an audience would want to engage with you? And the ones that I've the platforms I've seen that have failed and the things we've launched that have not gone well, it's not being able to answer that question up front is, I think it's really important. Yeah,
preached him.
I've had a lot of failures, I know. And the things that have resonated, like that question is, would definitely be answered up front, the things that have succeeded on that front.
So how important is research when maintaining, when trying to maintain an active social media account?
Research as it pertains to your audience?
Yes.
Oh.
Well, kind of like all around research.
I think it's table stakes. I feel like, have you ever tried to speak to someone who, you don't know much about and you say the wrong thing? Yeah, that has happened countless times to me. And I guarantee that will happen if you don't research who you're speaking to on social. And then secondly, if you don't have sources to back up whatever you tell them, I don't think you'll be able to build much credibility with the audience that you're trying to. And I think it will undermine the cause that you are working towards. So research is table stakes.
So do you think that focus keywords kind of play a role in that? Why is it so important to create target keywords or focus keywords to get the audience you want?
Definitely using the same kind of language that your audience uses is important. And even when it comes to your hashtag strategy, right? I would adopt a broad, narrow and specific approach. So broad being I don't know, BLM, right? Narrow being maybe location based. So BLM Los Angeles, right? And then specific being to the organization that we're speaking about. So I don't know, road to equal justice or something, you know,
Yes.
that would be a specific hashtag just for your brand, if that makes sense.
Hmm.
Hmm.
Can you tell us like when to use small or big hashtags?
When?
Yes. So like if you're discussing BLM, that's more
Hmm.
for a broad audience.
Yeah.
You would use a big hashtag.
No, well, to be honest, I think you should use like a mix of them when you're just speaking in when you publish a post, right? Because like I said, the ideal mix on Instagram is like 9 to 15 hashtags, right? So make some of them broad, make some of them specific, and then 1 and 2 of them are just for your brand. You know?
Mhm. Yes, that's good advice.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I don't see any more questions, Ashley. So yeah, really appreciate your time today. It's a real pleasure to join or to have you join us today. And I think it's a fantastic presentation that we'll be sharing around with everybody with a lot of useful pointers for the work that they're doing. So yeah, any final words before we close out the session?
I just wanted to say that I know that there's like a big fear when it comes to get started on social. And I think that's compounded sometimes when you have such important things to say and you don't want to make your brand look bad. And I think everybody feels that. And I just want to say, like, don't overthink it too much. Like, the only way to get better is to like dive in and practice. And I promise you that social media has a very short memory. So like making mistake is human, and social is all about showing that human side. So jump in and get started. And Carla, I will be trying to send that report over to you.
Sounds great. Yeah, it's get started and fail fast. Learn from your
Exactly.
mistakes. That's great. All right, Ashley, well, have a great weekend, and thanks again for joining us.
Thank you. And same to you guys.
Okay, take care. All right, well, our next presenter is Sanjeev Chatterjee. He's a professor, a visual storyteller, an avid mentor to young changemakers in media and related fields around the world. After earning his master's in English literature from Delhi University, he spent 2 years as a grassroots filmmaker focused on rural development in India. In 1987, he was awarded a full scholarship to Brooklyn College, where he completed his Master's of Fine Arts in Radio and Television, specializing in documentary storytelling. He's been at the University of Miami. He's been on the faculty of School of Communication since 1994. He's currently a full professor with appointments in the Department of Cinema and Interactive Media, as well as the Department of Journalism. He teaches courses in visual storytelling, media and society, film and television production, and he's here today to talk about media and the power of storytelling in particular. It's a real pleasure to welcome you, Professor Chatterjee. The floor is yours. Thank you for joining.
Thank you very much, Tim, for those kind words. I'm thrilled and really honored to be here to be addressing this audience. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, sounds fantastic.
Great. You know, I picked this topic because I talk ad nauseum about storytelling, and I find myself talking about storytelling in different contexts in different ways. And given the overarching kind of purpose that I saw for Peace Tech Lab, I started thinking about, you know, what to say about impact in storytelling, and therefore the purpose of storytelling. Of course, storytelling can have many purposes, but I would like to kind of talk about impact, but I want to start by recollecting my first kind of impression of impact as a kid. You know, there's a very famous Indian film. There's a very famous Indian film. Maraka, come over here. Come over here. Don't get excited. My bell rang. That's the problem. There's a. Just give me a second. let me let her out and go greet people.
I think we've all been there with with COVID and Zoom. So while Professor Chatterjee is getting the dog outside, let me share one more time the link to our grants program. And again, these are $2,000 grants, simple to apply to. And let me know if you have any questions. I'm at tim@peacetechlab.org.
My apologies. She gets excited when there's someone at the door. Otherwise, she was just sitting peacefully. But
I was saying we've all been there.
So I was saying that as a child growing up in India, I remember the movie Sholay. It was a very famous movie. It played for a year, maybe 2 years in the theater in my town where I grew up. And, I would see that the movie was never not house full. It was always packed. So there was a rickshaw puller in the summer that was standing next to me while we were coming out. And I asked him that, how many times have you seen this? He said, oh, I've seen this 7 times. And I'll keep coming back. And I was like, why did you see it 7 times? He said, oh, because this is a movie that allows me to just forget that I'm a rickshaw puller and the summer heat because it's air conditioned. And I laugh so much, but everything in the movie is completely not about what my life is about. That's why I keep coming back. And I remember it distinctly because I think that was my first realization to really talk of what the movie does to people or me, rather than just that, oh, it's entertainment. The why began being clearer to me, and I was seeking that through a long period of time. I mean, probably this is more than 40 years ago that this happened, right? And you start paying attention. So when I came to college, at that time, my aspiration was to be a Bollywood star, to help people escape, But then you face social realities, and I grew up in a fairly safe hands kind of a family, a middle-class family where everything was protective. So I didn't really face social realities till I was in college. And there I started thinking, wait, if I'm going to fit in, if I want to do something, how does this conceptualization of escape really fit? And it didn't anymore because, college does things to you more inside and outside the classroom. And in that process, I kind of discovered that maybe you can make documentary films, and documentary films would focus on these social realities. And so I actually shifted over by the second year in my college and pretty entrenched in it by my master's, to committed to making documentary films for change, social change, right? And that went on for a significant amount of time, where the concept was that, okay, there's a thing going on in front of me on the screen, and that screen is supposed to tell me as the audience member, what is the right thing to do, wrong thing to do, what are the things that are happening in the world. And through that, I learned that I should probably adjust how much water I use when I bathe, how hot it should be, how much meat I should really eat without, where it's coming from, so on and so forth. And it can be quite effective. So the concept was, yes, the media does things to me, but I can control what it does to me. So it doesn't always have to be escapist. So that was the evolution, right? Because I was told early, don't become a consumer, become a producer. And that was my introduction to America, by the way. Somebody told me almost in the indoor in 1987 when I came to the US, one of my professors told me that. I was like, wow, man, that's deep. Because, Americans, in my kind of way of thinking about the world, if they do one thing well, is to simplify things down to their essentials. And I learned a lot from that one statement. Stop being just a consumer, be a producer. In our time, I'm talking about 1987, come to America, you see, who do you see? Dan Rather, Tom Brokaw, and what was his name on CBS? On ABC, I'm sorry.
Peter Jennings, maybe?
Peter Jennings. So they are in your living room and they're telling you what the world is like and how you should understand the world, so on and so forth. And you're transfixed in prime time, just understanding. And the world is, of course, America. There is nothing, you have to go to BBC to really understand what was going on in the world. But that's it. They come into your living room but the media starts to get fractured, right? So then comes the cable, and then comes more cable, and then there are soon satellite, and there are 250 channels you don't know what to do with, but what you really do is surf. Go from one to the other. It holds your attention for about 3 seconds, and then you go to the other thing. And this is pre-internet still. And then comes the internet. I mean, it's not really pre-internet, but the way we know the internet hadn't been invented yet. And then comes the internet, and you're completely confused. As a matter of fact, you have very little knowledge of how many channels you actually do have access to. You know it's vast, but you have no sense of. And in this environment that we are living in, this is what I want to talk about, that how do we conceptualize impact, right? Because the media is doing very little substantively to us. We actually don't understand what it's doing in terms of how this kind of bathing in the ocean of information and entertainment. We don't quite understand it. But we are struggling with trying to figure out, in this context of today's talk, that what can impact look like, and what would impact be like, what would be the purpose of impact. So in this, I don't really have an advanced original thought about it. I've been told by postmodernists that original thought doesn't exist. So I must acknowledge the two people that I'm borrowing from. One is Henry Jenkins, now at USC, and the second one is William Uricchio, head of the Open Documentary Lab at MIT. So Jenkins started saying that, look, where we live, especially as storytellers and as media practitioners, we live in a transmedia world. We may not have a huge audience in one platform, but we can tell the same story over and over again in different forms, in different platforms, and we can do it from our telephones, our smartphones, our tablets, and our computers. We don't have much of an infrastructure anymore to be able to do that, and that we must occupy for impact this transmedia world. And whether we understand it or not, the most successful people are doing it, not only at an individual level, even studios are doing it. Today, if you see a Hollywood pitch, very often the Hollywood pitch will say, the pitch is a world-building pitch. The movie is only part of the world that we are trying to build. And this concept of world building on transmedia platform is not really out of our reach if we think about it. So for example, I'll give you an example of what I'm trying to do, right? So last year when COVID hit, I founded a small little organization called Media for Change in 2014, and I do all my work through Media for Change. I started thinking that, okay, this COVID is a really dark space. What would a transmedia project look like in terms of bringing hope and seeing beyond the kind of disruption that is a negative disruption that COVID has brought about. So I said, dreams are a strong kind of an image. So let's start a dream project. So what would it be? So I had a friend who had developed this app. It's called Gather Voices. It's a fairly simple way to take selfie videos and upload it to a platform and to aggregate it. So he said, "Oh, you can use it for free if you want to use this." So I said, "Okay." So we sent out word and said, "Why don't you tell us about your post-COVID dream?" And a picture started to emerge. It's kind of a crowdsourced video of people thinking about what would the world look like when COVID ended. And I started looking for people who are doing similar things. And I'll give you one example. I found a school teacher who's in Pennsylvania, who's giving up his job to follow something he'd done for 13 years. And that was to go with kids, children in schools, and have them make little flags, and draw flags. On the flag, they would write down their dream. And then at the end of the whole exercise, they would have a big festival with the flags fluttering in the air and so on and so forth. So we started talking to him, and he was like, "Yeah, it's about sparking imaginations, seeing oneself in the future." And I said, "Great. Can we categorize them according to the Sustainable Development Goals?" He said, "That's a great idea." So then an app came out of it, which was you can see it. It's the app is called Dreamline, and the text is on one side and the SDG is on the other side, and his foundation, now called the Dream Cloth Foundation, if I'm not mistaken, his name is Jeffrey Harlan. So we are a loose group of people around the world who want to follow this idea that conceiving a dream has a powerful effect on people's lives. In this structure, we will just continue to move and grow this. The movie is a movement. Somebody else said that to me about a movie I had made, so I've adopted that. It was said by a guy called Sam Grog. I must acknowledge that. He was the dean of my school. "Oh, you're not trying to make a movie. What you're trying to do is make a movement." So this is the kind of movement, loose movement, that we are trying, and this is the world building that I'm talking about. So now I've just finished the 13th episode of my podcast, which is called Where Dreams Come From, and that is aimed at a completely different audience. That one I'm talking right now up to 20 episodes. I will finish my season in English, and then it'll be taken over by someone else who is going to do it in German for 20 episodes, then in Portuguese, then in Spanish, then in Bengali, then in Hindi, and then we'll come back to English again for the second season. So this is the concept. We have a 2-year cycle of Where Dreams Come From. And now with involving other people, what we are saying we are doing is basically using a transmedia platform, but in a different way. What has happened, and this is where I must acknowledge William Uricchio, who's saying, we used to believe that the media does things to people, that we sit in front of a screen or we sit in front of the radio and we listen to things or we see things, and that is supposed to change us. But what has really happened now is specifically in the context of impact is that we believe that there is more impact in what we do with the media rather than what the media does to us. And we should not discount that. I sensed that very early in my life because I realized that when I teach people to make movies about, let's say, the environment, young filmmakers, and I meet them a lot, not only in America, but in the rest of the world, and this is my mentorship work, I see that they are the first frontline people affected by what they start to study about, learn about before they make a movie. So they may think that they know about the environment, but they learn much more through this process, and they become committed to the ideas that they then, come up with and things like that. So they become the best spokespeople for that cause. If we accept that as an impact, one might say that the impact scale is very small. It's at an individual level. But what we can do, and this is what we were talking about with the social media thing, but I think that we live in an age where the impact is in the community we build through the making of the media. So not what only the media, what the media does to us, but what we do with the media to build community around causes. So if equal justice is the cause, how do we create and maintain a committed community around the cause that grows organically and that creates a connective tissue for the cause and organically as we move forward? Is that something that we are paying attention to? And are we monitoring it? Can we speak sensibly about it? What kind of traction is it having? And there was some conversation about snowballing. I mean, do we understand the nature of that snowball? And what works and what is not working? So those are the two ideas that I wanted to posit for discussion today. One is, of course, transmedia, as our approach transmedia. And the second is, what are we doing with the media to build community around the causes that we identify are our main causes? So with that, I'll just keep quiet and listen to people's questions. Please post them. I can see them on the post, or if there are people who have other questions, that'd be great.
Yeah, so if you have questions for Professor Chatterjee, please put them in the chat window. I have one comment that's come in so far. Said very powerful. The media has changed so much, and I mean, just to put it all in perspective, like you arrived in the U.S. and you had the big three news media, and now it's everybody's got their cell phones and producing content more than ever before, I guess. So you've seen a lot in your field, I'm sure. Like it just changed. It's exponential.
Yeah, I mean, there's a new Netflix film, for example. It's called Skater Girl. It's made in India, and it's about a young girl who learns to skate and finds freedom in the skate and things like that. I happen to know that girl in real life, but she's not afforded any credit in the film, which has become kind of controversial. But there's no mistaking that it's based on the girl that I'm talking about, because I've known her for a while. And I've known the person who started the skate park in the middle of nowhere in India. She's a German woman. Traditionally, what would have been the approach to addressing this kind of, we know the story about, for example, Born in Brothels, which was a movie that was made about sex workers in Calcutta, but none of the benefits of the Oscar-winning film flowed down to the sex workers on whose life the movie was made. The Gulabi Gang is another film based in India, which they sued and they got some credit and some money, so on and so forth. But it created a vitiated around the movement. And so my question was that, okay, let's say I believe that this story was taken from a poor indigenous girl who succeeded through skating. What would be the just way of doing it without disrupting her life? In the past, it would be, find the right lawyer, take them to court, afford her a credit, maybe some money, and say, okay, we are settled. I think there are other options. As a matter of fact, the board that runs that organization in India, they agree with me. And the other option is, how can we get these young indigenous kids to tell their own stories? What will that project look like? And guess what? All of them have smartphones. They're poor, but it's an essential thing. And 3 of them want to make movies. So, and the complicated part is that I can jump into that, but I'm not going to do that. I think it has to be conceived as a movement, even if it's a small movement. It has to be conceived as building community with other indigenous groups, with other media groups, with other skater groups. So the conceptualization becomes strategic first. So I actually told them I was going to write a grant, and then I wrote back saying that, look, I'm not ready for the grant. And they're like, what do you mean? You have the whole. I said, I think I know the movie we would make, but that's not enough. And then they wrote back a long letter that they had a discussion, and they were like, wow, we've never thought of it like this. Because strategically, you would basically conceive of it as, okay, how do you build a system that goes beyond these kids for young folks in indigenous communities in India to get excited about doing this kind of, and that's just part of making them really part of democracy that they don't have right now. They don't have a voice in the public forum right now. It's a huge opportunity. And that's what I'd like to do. So I told them that, look, if it's at that level, then I think, and not I'll just be an advisor. I want them to do it. Because they can. I really believe they can. And so that's what I'm working on. My podcast, thank you for the question, Sophia. My podcast can be found. It's called Where Dreams Come From. You'll find it on all the major platforms, on Apple, on Google, on Pandora, so on and so forth.
Yeah, that's great. And we've actually got a fellow on our team right now at Peace Tech Lab who was running Skatistan in Afghanistan for girls that wanted to skate. I see.
So the one that I'm talking about was actually inspired by Skatistan.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, I've never seen anything like inspire young women and girls around the world. Like it just it's so much. I mean, they're beyond inspiring. It's really touching.
Yeah.
So Professor Chatterjee, I've got another question that came in regarding your students. Like, have you seen any change in student interest in media for racial, social justice issues?
I think with what has happened in the last, let's say, 2 years, there is no one who is going to say that it is an invisible issue for them. In my American students, there are 2 issues that come to mind that need to be overcome. First is, why did they come to college or university to study media? That background is usually mainstream driven, to be a reporter with a network, or to be a movie maker in Hollywood, or to be, so that's the norm, right? Slowly but surely, you start to see interest in international film for movie students, the influences, because Hollywood acknowledges a lot of influence from Korea, for example, or now from China, India, so on and so forth. And of course, platforms like Netflix give them amazing opportunities to reimagine what that entertainment space can look like. I teach at a private institution at the University of Miami, and we do have students that become socially committed, but they are not the norm. They are usually the exception.
Oh, sorry about that. I was on mute. There's another. Wow, where did it go? Is there a template or formula for documentaries you've worked on, and how has the process changed over the years? I guess with the change in media and things over the years.
Right. So, I decided very early that I would not go into the industry for a very simple reason, that I wanted to be in a position to be contemporary, and B, to be doing things that as an artist that basically come to me rather than someone telling me what to do. Not that I have anything against people. I don't have a allergy to people saying, oh, this should be done like this. Not at all. But things that I call my work, I wanted it to be my work. And I thought, as a matter of fact, I got into the MFA because someone told me that this was the route. So I was working in a village in India. No, I was working on a film about the 1,000 years of unbroken history of Delhi. And it was being directed by a very, very famous director in India. And it was a documentary film. The producer had an MFA from a university in the US. And he had come and he was bankrolling the film. So at the wrap party, he was like, what do you want to do? I said, I want to make my own films. How do I make my own films? He said, oh, you should go to America and become a tenured professor. I said, what is that? He said, well, not only will they support you, they'll actually, maybe seed fund some of the work, and they will want you to do the work because they want you to be current in the classroom, and they'll encourage you to do it. I said, really? I said, yes. And 9 months later, I was in the US on a scholarship, pursuing my MFA. So it worked out pretty much like that. So, it's a hard question for me to answer in terms of what's the formula, because I don't really follow a formula. I try to use very few words in my films if I can. Some films don't lend themselves to it. So I made a film about Calcutta's love of sweets and diabetes last year. It was supposed to be a humorous piece. It was supposed to showcase the characters, so that has words. But I've done like completely wordless films on cities, about water, and they've done fairly well. So it depends on what the project is. So I will basically sit down and think, okay, what is the best kind of treatment? And I have to say that I have the luxury of saying that I put food on the table as a professor, and I make films because those are the films I want to make, and I'll find ways of getting them done.
All right, last call for questions. Anybody have any final questions for Professor Chatterjee? All right, well, sir, thank you so much for joining us. And I know you got a busy workload, but it was great to hear about your journey and things that people can take away, and just that whole arc of media history that you've experienced and you're seeing right now. So yeah, thank you again for your time today.
Not at all. Thank you. It has been my honor, and I hope this is useful to folks as they conceptualize what they want to do with the media. I know that I presented a big picture kind of approach to the whole thing. I hope there are some takeaways for people. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
That's great. Well, thank you, sir. Have a good weekend.
You too. Bye-bye.
And for everybody else, we've got, again, our small grants are available to you to apply to. We have a deadline of July 11th, and we'll be letting everybody know by July 18th. But it's a super easy process to apply to. I'm going to put the link in one more time. And my email address is tim@peacetechlab.org. And if you have any questions about the training, if you need any more help or mentorship, just let us know, and we'll reach back out and find you help, and then let you know about the grants as well. So thank you for your time over the last 2 weeks. Kamei, do you have any final question or sorry, not questions. Do you have any final thoughts or anything you want to discuss?
This was just a great training, and I'm so glad for everyone who came out. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, everybody in Miami. Really appreciate your time. Take care and have a great weekend.
Thank you. Bye-bye.